everyone, welcome back to Adobe Live. Today we are exploring Adobe Premiere, and I almost said Photoshop there. Been on Photoshop mindset. We're exploring Adobe Premiere and we're exploring color grading. We are here in pro tips, so you're going to be exploring some of the things that maybe we've touched on before, but we're going to do a deep dive on color scopes and color grading. So stick around, say hello in the chat, let me know where are you joining from, how's your day going. I can see already Sean on the chat. I see Robert, what's up? So awesome to see y'all here on the chat. So let me know what level of color grading do you consider yourself in when it comes to Premiere. Is this kind of like your first time? Have you been playing around with it but you don't quite know like a unique workflow for yourself? You know, that's when you really know. It's when you have a unique workflow that is your very own. So today we're going to explore a lot of that. Let me know in the chat where you're at, but let's get to know each other for those of you who are just learning about this and myself. All right, so folks, my name is Cyn Lagos. I will be your mentor today. I explore mentorship in design, photo, and video. And today we're going to be exploring, as I said, video. So that's going to be super fun. So I love being able to explore different things. And in here, in this section, you're always going to find giveaways. I love giving resources for anyone who needs them. These resources are actually some really cool resources for Premiere overlays, so check those out. Some of them are during live streams available for free for a limited time, so kind of check those out pretty frequently if you want those during that little time zone of freebies. Okay, so let's jump into one last thing I'm going to say here is under classes, you're going to find Transformation Mondays, Medium Unlimited, places where I get to republish some of the streams that we do here on Adobe Live. So definitely check those out. Some color secrets here that also explore some lesser known tips about Adobe Premiere's color. That was actually one of my favorites. So definitely check that out and restream it, you know, at your leisure. All right, so today we're gonna be diving into color grading in Adobe Premiere. And I know that that can be a bit intimidating for a lot of people, at least from the conversations I've had with people. They tell me that, you know, color grading tends to be the part that, you know, kind of slows them down in the video editing process. So I definitely want to dive into some of the technicalities of this because that is gonna help you feel more familiar with color grading. It's not so much a stylistic step at the very beginning. It's very much technical right at the start, and then it steps over into stylistic. So let me explain what I mean by that. So immediately what I want to do is, I'm going to just fix my mic here real quick. All right, so immediately what I want to do is explore the modular windows. So in here, I've got Windows workspace and I've got all panels if I want to. I'm currently in the color workspace right here, and as you can see, I make like my own workspaces too, so I welcome you to do that. It's always really nice to work in your own module of things. So if it looks slightly different, that is why I am in the color workspace at the moment. And, okay, so I'm not in beta, I'm in the regular Premiere. That's also important because beta has gotten some interesting new features, so check those out whenever you want to, but I wanted to stick to the familiar for the moment. Okay, so we've got here the Lumetri Color, and we've got here a footage that is S-Log. So let's talk a little bit about S-Log footage. So very simply put, S-Log footage is something that with our eyes, we do not see the color variations or the dynamic range. We don't see it quite plainly with our eyes, right? Our eyes are very peculiar. They're very amazing, and that is what cameras and everything are trying to strive to be fit. But at the end of the day, this color is made so that you have an easier time in color grading in post. So that is S-Log footage, right? So S-Log footage is often commonly used. So for people who want to broadcast to your TV, things like this. The camera, it was ready, the color palette was already pretty baked in, right? So whenever you see footage that has I actually don't have an example of that, but I kind of wish I had brought one. All right, so for example, this has already been post edited. So when you see footage that already has that color that you want, that is the camera doing those color processing for you. And that's great. You know, sometimes you want that. You want your camera to do the color processing. You don't want to have to worry about that. I can think of everybody who's a fan of Fuji films. They love how the color palette is emulating film, but ultimately they're making those choices for you, and they're baking them within that footage. So it makes it a little bit harder to have your own variation or your own fingerprint in the color grading post processing. So what you want to do is something that is now becoming fairly popular, even for iPhone users, for example, is S-Log. So you might find this more of a word that is becoming a household name, right? S-Log footage, right? So it's becoming an interesting thing that everybody's learning, and hopefully we'll get to learn it a little bit deeper here. So S-Log footage is going to be flat so that you have an opportunity to do some post-processing. So let me open this footage here. I'm going to right click it. You can't see this, but that's fine. New sequence from clip. All right. So for example, let's look at this footage right here. We got some footage. It looks mostly good, right? But you can see here the colors. The blue is flat. This is actually red, burgundy red, pretty bright, not as visible, right? It's very flat in here. So that's on purpose. Our eyes can't see the dynamic range, but the camera footage and the sensor and the camera has actually equipped this footage with a lot of dynamic range, a lot of color information that we get to pull here in the post-editing process. So like I said, the first phase is technical. So with Lumetri, what I love to do is almost layer all the Lumetri effects. So let's compartmentalize our workflow. So the first thing I want to do is compartmentalize the conversion LUT. So because this is an S-Log footage, we're going to need a conversion LUT. Conversion LUTs are basically this, think of it like coming from the world of photography, think of it as the filter. This filter is not there for style. This filter is there to fix, to bring this footage to our eyes' content, right? So it's a conversion LUT because it makes it look like the color that our eyes can actually understand. So this is more of a fundamental step. So let's go into Lumetri here. I'm gonna pick Lumetri right here. And under here, I've got a bunch of different LUTs. I'm gonna scoot over here. Hopefully y'all can see me. Okay, so over here I have a bunch of different LUTs. LUTs are provided by your cameras. So your cameras say, hey, we're giving you S-Log, we have to give you a conversion LUT. And a LUT is a lookup table. It's a very fancy way of saying a filter, and it's very, very deep if we really go down that rabbit hole. But ultimately, this is gonna help us convert this to a color palette that befits our eyes. So now I've got here Blackmagic, I've got here Canon S-Log, I've got here Sony S-Log, you might not be able to see right behind me, but I've got Sony S-Log right here, right? So if I pick Sony S-Log, I'm doing it at the clip level, by the way. I'm not adding this to an adjustment layer. I'm using my clip. So I'm putting these layers on my clip. All right, so let's do S-Log 3 right here. Okay, S-Log 2. Do you see that? That is a big difference of the color palette, right? So let's undo. So before and then after. We haven't even added any like color overlays or anything like this. Yes, I can raise the volume. Let's do this. Let me know how that's sounding. Give me a thumbs up on the chat. Cool. Robert says cool. Okay, great. My Island's the Forest. All right, some Star Wars conversations happening. I wish I had some Star Wars footage, but I don't. I'm sorry. I think a lot of these locations are inspired Star Wars, to be fair. This is Colorado here. So, okay. We're following. So far, we've added a conversion LUT, and this is what's happening. Let me know if the sound is good. All right, still a little bit low. Hello, hello. I have my volume all the way. Okay. How about now? How does this sound, y'all? There you go. Tell me it's sounding louder. Yes? Okay. I don't want you to miss these awesome tips, so let me know if the sound is sounding better. Yes, getting better. Woo! All right. I love it when y'all are like, just, you always have my back here. Okay, sounds good, says Robert. Okay, sweet. All right, there you go. Let me know if it's too loud. I do kind of get excited there. Turn it up. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. Okay. So far we've added a conversion LUT here, and this is a Sony conversion LUT, and you can see that the colors have come back. That red is actually red, which is really nice. And that is a technical step. It's a fundamental step. Think of it as a house. We've got our foundation, and then we go in and we style it. We do the interior design, which is the color grading aspect. So divide that into those two aspects. We've got the technical, which is going to be first, we got to hit our S-Log with our conversion LUT, and depending on your camera, of course. And then we're gonna hit it with some color grading. Okay, so far so good. We've got our conversion LUT in here, and let's play this really quick so you can see it.
This is the skill that we're just discovering. We should make this a sport.
I don't have audio here for this one, but we're playing around with snowballs basically and trying to see who can toss it better. It's awesome. I love Colorado. What a beautiful place. Absolutely majestic. And you can see here we've got some interesting white color here that has hints of blue. So this is where I would dive into the aspects of color grading. So let's go into the color grading part here. Let me see. I think that's gonna help. My mic was probably too far, y'all. There you go. This is a mic lesson, I think, also. Okay. All right, so let me know if that's better. All right, so here we go. We've got our LUT applied to this footage, and let's try it on this one, for example. So we've got this footage right here, and you can see that when we look at it, it's fairly flat, right? But then we go here and we go into S-Log 3, and it really makes those blues pop. There's a lot of purple hints if you start to recognize those little elements in the highlights, midtones, and shadows. You're going to start to see all of the differences in the color palettes that are within those shades, right? So if you look at the highlights are mostly white. But when you start to look at the shadows, they have that little bit of purple hints on it. And so that's sometimes cool. Like that might be what you're after. But you can always correct that by dividing those midtones, highlights, and shadows. So one of my favorite places to do that is the curves. Now, I do like to move these things around. Like I said, this is modular. So I like doing something like this, placing the Lumetri below. So I can see this and I can see my Lumetri. And then we're going to pull scopes here on the left-hand side. Okay, so I get to see my frame, but I'm not predominantly on my frame. What I'm focusing on is my scopes. Now, these things look crazy, right? That looks very, very intimidating for sure. What are these? Feels a little bit scientific, sci-fi of some kind. But here's the thing. They're actually fairly simple. I tend to use this one here. So when you right click, you get a chance to pick any of them. So we've got the histogram, which to be fair, I don't use as frequent. But we've got the parade, we've got the waveform, which is up here. We've got the vector scope, which is here to the left. Now, I use here the parade to get that white. So for example, we go back to this variation, right? Everything looks fairly good here. But let's say if you're just browsing the color information of this footage, you can almost see him in here. Do you see this? So let's do a quick play and take a look at this waveform. He's right there.
I think you're a protege, you know?
So you can see all the color information. When he appears, there's just that much more red in the scene, right? Because there's all of this red here on the scene also. So if you want to mitigate the color amount, you're thinking in terms of RGB, so red, blue, and green. And when those colors meet in the middle, you get the most purest white balance that you can. So for example, we don't want any of our colors to peak at the top because that means we lose that information. We don't want any of our colors to be crushed all the way to the bottom either, because that will also lose that dynamic range. What we want is anything between 80, 90, or 10 down here. So you can see there's some green here that is way below the belt, right? So we want to be able to bring that up. So how do we do that? I like using the RGB curves here in the Lumetri Color. And again, I'm on the clip. So all of these effects are happening to the clip. So what I like to do is go target the green, right? So in this case, there's green on purpose. So it all depends kind of what you're after. But I do want to bring that little bit of green up. So what I could do here, okay, is I'm going to raise this green just a little bit. And you can start to see how that changes my scene just a tad. So when I bring up the green, you can see the green wave changing here on the parade. So now it's not as low. And when it comes to color grading, the truth is everything is subtlety. That is the truth with photography. That is the truth with video also. It's very rarely that you kind of push everything all the way to the top. Now, I do like to grab this this line right at the center because that's the midtones. Okay, so I do like to do that instead of, I don't know why that's, okay, there you go. So I do like to grab it right at the middle instead of the top, because the top is the highlights, the bottom is the shadows. So we want to be able to pull kind of everything all at once. So you can start to see how that makes it look a little bit warmer, because we pull the green from the bottom, right? And everything works in those three different ways. So let's jump here on a different image, a different video, just to talk about tonality. So if we go here, hey, what's up? I see some new people here. I see Oliver, I see Cyn. What's up? Let us know. Fear of the dark side is the power you give it. Hey, well said. That is definitely applies to video. The darker the video, the harder it is, to be honest. Okay, so let's go here and create a new sequence from this clip. So now I grabbed this clip that I thought was really cool, with a lens that got very close, and I love the way the spotlight was hitting my eye. And so if you can see it there, this is really neat, but it's again an S-Log, so it's fairly flat. So let's go over to our Lumetri up here, and I'll just do full frame with the little squiggly. And in here, I want to go to the top, basic correction, and grab myself a LUT. So now that makes it look fairly red, right? But it does bring the colors back. Do you see that? Okay, but I know that's not my skin tone. So here's a trick to grab good skin tones. So what I want to do is I want to go to Effect Controls, and I want to grab a little part of the skin tone here. Maybe a little bit of the highlight and the shadow at the same time. Okay, so that's going to be a mask that's going to be there temporarily. It's not going to remain there forever. But the reason why we want to do that is because back in the Lumetri Scopes, we've got this little fella right here. Let's turn this on. We've got this little fella right here. That is vector scopes. Now, you may not see this right away. I did not know this existed, but there's a thin little line right here between yellow and red, right? So think of the scopes, this vector scopes, as almost a bullseye, right? So the bullseye right at the center is desaturated. As you go out, you're going to have more saturation. So you can see here in this color, my skin has kind of like in the middle of saturation. It's not hyper saturated. It's kind of a fair place. Now, all of these colors, red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, yellow, they're all possible within the scene. But in my scene, I'm predominantly in the red zone. So that's good because our skin tone tends to have more red. If it's in the green zone, then we're in trouble, right? Because that means there's something off. Or if it's too much in the blue zone, again, in trouble, unless this is a creative choice. So color grading is the stylistic part, is the interior designing of our foundation. So remember that this is color grading now. Now, so when we're doing the tone of skin, which we always have to take care of, there's a little line right here between yellow and red that most skin tones fall under. So that's a good guide for us to have this little bit of luminance land right on that line. So you know what? This is doing a fairly good job. It's not that bad. If we put it like here, it kind of has a similar tonality. You can start to see the changes in our graphs. RGB. Okay. So I think I'm going to play with right here because it has a little bit of shadow. Okay. So again, I love curves. I think the curves are probably the best way to mitigate how much red, green, or blue is in the graph. So if we want to bring this a little bit closer to yellow, we might have to remove a little bit of red. So you can see here, if I raise it higher, okay, so if I raise it higher, then our vibrance of this little graph is telling us actually it's very, very red. You are going out of the bullseye, which is desaturation, to major saturation. So that's how you read that, okay? So now if we bring it back down, now there's no saturation. You can see it's all the way in the bullseye. It's all the way in the center. So we want to find a nice, happy place. And it's kind of funny because these files I'm working with are fairly good files. They're not as problematic. So I'm not having to do too much changes here. But you want to find a place where it lands right on the line. So here's what I'm going to do. There might be a little bit of blue in this scene because it's telling me it's closer to red and magenta. So let's pull this down and take a look at this. Now it's landing straight on the line, and that's what we want. That's the line. Now look at the skin tone here. So this is, let's undo. Now can you see how much blue was in that skin tone? Do you see it? It's very subtle, but you're gonna train your eye to see that. And so if you know that, maybe you can't see it right away in this little tiny triangle, but you can see it on your graph. You can see that the luminance is landing between red and magenta. And so, which is between blue, you know, magenta is made by blue and red. This is why color theory is so important in any aspect of design, creation, creativity. So in here, we know that we needed to pull on the blue line. So let's redo it. And now it's straight on our skin tone line, right? It could do even more, actually, like a hint, a hair mode. There you go. So now let's go back to effects. And in effects, yes, you don't want it to be too green, says Robert. You're like Hulk almost. Blue, your avatar. Absolutely. So there's a creative choice there that they made. So there's kind of like that possibility because again, color grading is the stylistic part of our process. So here on the mask, I'm going to remove the mask. We don't need the mask. And now we can see how it changed. Now it's a different skin tone and it's so nice. And so we can look at our scene again and maybe bring that a tad bit up if we wanted to. There you go. I think that's fine. So if I go back to my Lumetri on my effects, I can see I have a Lumetri layer right here. I can turn that off and I can see how it used to be before. And I can see now so much more color value there, so much more depth happening. And I'm gonna be fair with this scene. You see this little icon right here? I'm using a proxy because this is a fairly big file. It's a 4K file. So you might not see the fullest of the fullest quality here, but I recommend using proxies for speedy workflows. And I think we have a class on proxies here on Adobe Live, so definitely check that out. Okay, so already we have way better skin tone, and that looks so phenomenal. And I think I could even slow this down to like 50 to make it look even more demure. Let's see. Beautiful. That's much better, right? So I just did that using first a LUT, second our vector scope, and in partnership with our curves in Lumetri. Okay, so I did all of that in this Lumetri. So if I take this off, it takes off all of those different steps, even though there are 3 different steps. But you can change that. You can definitely do that in 3 steps. So for example, let's pull this scene right here and try a different zone. New sequence from clip. Boom, boom. All right, so here I've got a really sweet shot of Hawaii. This is why I'm wearing Hawaii. And I did a long, a shutter drag on purpose. And this is when you have your frame rate at, maybe you have your frame rate, let's say at 24 frames per second, and you're supposed to multiply that by 2, but I didn't. I was like, you know what? I'll just go lower and lower. And that turns into this shutter drag, which is most times technically not what you want, but stylistically, it can turn into something really cool. So let's do a quick play here. So you can see they're playing soccer. Let me see, I'm gonna raise the volume here. They're playing soccer and you can see the shutter drag happening and it looks so cool. And this fellow back here, he's not moving much, so you get to see him kind of still and they look blurry and the silhouettes are phenomenal. And so this is a flat image, and even as a flat image, it tends to have plenty of color. But we're gonna go in here and do our steps. First, we're gonna do our LUT, right? So now we're getting familiar with a workflow that's very similar, can be applied to any clip, right? So long as it's an S-Log clip. So we've got S-Log 2 here, that works for me. Too much, I would say. S-Log 3. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? The S-Logs don't work. So it's up to you to decide whether the conversion is a perfect fit, or if you want to work with it without the S-Log, because like I said, this one had a lot of color already visible. So say for example, I did something like this. I might want to choose to remove this S-Log of it all in one Lumetri effect, then it takes everything away like I had in the last clip. So instead, what I'm gonna do, right, we've got here's what I mean. We've got here our effects, and in our effects we have one Lumetri color, okay? And so far we've got nothing but our conversion LUT. But what I want to do is add another Lumetri color effect, and this is going to help me layer and compartmentalize. Now I've got 2. So if I choose to remove one of them at any point, I'm not removing all of them at once. So I'm compartmentalizing all my effects. First, my LUT, second, my grading. So this is one of those where I might choose to forego the conversion. Now, some people find that to be like, I don't know, bad or sacrilegious, but you know, everything is about pushing and pulling. It's about seeing what your result is. Grain used to be technically incorrect, but now we use it stylistically because we like it. So there's always room for you to push that rule. Rules aren't rules, they're guidance, okay? So there's always room for that. Now, let's jump into this new Lumetri effect, and let's jump into this new Lumetri effect, and we're gonna add a little bit of color grading here. So we're gonna go into the curves. I love the curves, as you may be able to tell. And I'm gonna be able to go into my scopes and examine this scene. Lumetri Scopes. Wow, this looks wild. This is a good air video clip. You know, it has a lot that I have to work with because look at how much is being crushed and completely out of bounds here at the top. Over 100, over 90. So we want to correct that. We can see that there's red right here at the top. Is there room for correcting this with the conversion LUT? Let's check it out. So let's target the red and bring that red down below 90. Okay, we're just gonna grab our midtones. So I'm gonna take this off because it tends to malfunction if I use it. There you go. All right, so let's pull that here. Let's pull it down. See how much down can we pull it. And you can see it's like tricky as ever. Let's keep pulling some of these colors. Now, one of the things that happens with curves is that it always looks really funky until you align the RGB at once. So you can see there's a lot of highlight. So this time I'm just going to target the highlights and see how much I can pull from there. And now this graph is not ideal, but you can see stylistically, it looks fairly beautiful, right? There's a lot of contrast here. It's not ideal because most times you're not trying to make everyone a silhouette, but this was a stylistic shot. This was a shot that was meant to be created from the start. I made them a silhouette. I did not want dynamic range on them to begin with. So there's some room here to be like, okay, it's not the exact graph as opposed to the skin tone, right? But there is room for stylistic expression here. So it might be a waveform that you want to memorize so that you can do that. And you know, there's debates about what works and what doesn't work. And I hear a lot of conversations about idealizing the right approach. But in my experience, I have never abided by any specific thing as a hard rule. I've always felt, okay, there's probably room to push it to the left, room to push it to the right. And that approach has always paid off for me. So I find it to be perfect. Now, this is one look. I can work with that. I'm going to duplicate this clip and see what would happen if I wasn't working with the LUT, right? And I can do that because I have them separately. So I'm going to remove this LUT here. And look what happens. Everybody says you need LUT, but just like that, I have a better color palette without the LUT in this case. So there are situations where that may change. So this is the previous one with LUT. This is without the LUT and only color grading on it, right? And so there's variations of what you can do here. And what's cool is that we layer them. So we have options to play with. Now, I might want to add another Lumetri here to add even more style to it. So let's add another Lumetri color effect. This time, I'm going to go into color wheels, and that's what I'm going to focus on. So the color wheels are awesome because to me, they're there for correcting something that's off, much like the curves, but they're also there for stylistic choices. So I'm going to use mine for stylistic choice. Nate says, wow, that's so pretty. Oh, I'm glad you liked it. What's up, Ted? So nice to see you in here. Let's see, how are you feeling, Sean? Oh, what's up, Ray? Stefan, why are you teary emoji? I need to catch up with the chat. All right, so there is the coolest things about this is we have shadows, midtones, and highlights in the same way. So everything kind of works in those same guidelines, right? You got shadows, midtones, and highlights. You've got RGB. So memorize that. Right? Those things are going to be very much a common denominator across the board in anything you're doing in Lumetri Color. So in here, what we want to do is, in my case, I like to paint with these. I think of them as ways, as a color palette, as a way to paint color in a scene that might not have that color. So this is kind of cool. You can also use it for correction, but I like to think of it like this in this step. So we've got a third layer, a third Lumetri color effect. That's this one right here. And we're going to add a little bit of color in the shadows. So now currently my shadows are mostly black, and I think they have a hint of green. I can't really tell, but I think so. So if I go into my Lumetri Scopes, which look wild, definitely not what people tell you they should look, but ironically, we've got the look. So you can see here, let's actually examine it because it's so funny to me that we can commit errors on purpose. So look at this. So we've got all of the saturation happening. You see how much it's exploding? It's like a universe of explosion, of color explosion. So you can see how much amazing saturation is happening in here. But we love it. It looks so fantastic, right? So let's see if we can add a little bit of color on the shadows. And I can use this wheel right here to add some color. So currently is on 0. And now we're going to pull some color in here, maybe an opposing color or something blue. And you can see that it starts to create a different tonality here at the top. Anywhere where there is a little bit of shadows, it's going to change. So I'm going to just go around the circle here so you can see the differences. If we add a little bit of green, maybe this occasion is leading up to a moment that is negative, right? So it might be a point of the story where things are going to go awry, right? So that might be where you add that green color symbolism. Maybe it's a romantic moment. Maybe something's about to happen where it's a turning point for a romance story. So you add a little bit of that purple, blue hue, because there's something about that tonality that makes us feel like it's romantic. Or maybe it's a hot day. Something's kind of hitting the point of like, okay, I figured something out. And I don't know, there's a lot of symbolism to color palettes, right? So that's something to consider. Let me see. And then you've got here, I think I'm going to reset this. I can double click it to reset it, by the way. I've got here a little bit of blue. I think I'm going to stick with the blue. And now let's target some of the midtones and highlights. So where are the highlights? Highlights are right here, right? And so that is mostly yellow. Let's add some purple in there. What would that do? Let's add some green in there. Do you see that? You're targeting just those specific spots with highlights, midtones, and shadows. And that could be so powerful. Suddenly my scene goes from, let's go back to how it used to be. Goes from flat, completely flat, to some beautiful hues. Do you see that? That's wild, right? And that's just by adding some color into the midtones, shadows, and highlights. So let's do a quick replay here of this shot. I'm going to do one without so that we can see what that looked like. And that's just me blocking out all the Lumetri colors here. All right, so let's do a quick replay. That's with just the LUT. Right? We did a lot of correction. Actually, there was a LUT there that I forgot to turn off. Let's do that in here. Nothing. Color. That's awesome, right? And so when we get to understand a little bit more about the type of footage that we're bringing in, our cameras, for example, we buy them, they're so expensive, and we may not know how to actually take advantage of all of its potential. You know, this is how you find out. This is how you examine your footage and try to get something more out of what you've recorded. So for example, I'll grab this scene right here. So reveal new sequence, where are you? Oh, here you are. So let's grab the scene here. I think we have room for one more. So I love this scene. You can see here, again, this is, let me just command you this. So it's here. All right, I'm gonna take off the audio here because the audio is, I'm gonna hold Alt. Let's just mute it. Okay. All right. So we've got here a very flat image. So we're going to follow our steps. We're going to do our compartmentalization. I always have a hard time with that word. But basically, we're going to organize ourselves between our foundation and our styling. So foundation wise, we need to convert this S-log, right? So we can right click it. We can find out more about it, right? We can go into reveal in project, right click it, media file properties. There you are. And so it tells me, okay, that's a 4K image. I mean, that's a 4K footage. It's at 60 frames, which tells me, hey, I can slow it down half the way. That's awesome. Good to know. Rec 709. Okay, that is what my footage is. Okay, cool. So I can do there's no LUT on it. We're going to do the LUT, right? So we can do a couple of things here. So now we can go into our Lumetri Scopes, and you can see this footage looks so different, doesn't it? Look at these waveforms. They're completely different. And you know what? There's no color in here. Look at these vector scopes. The color is all the way at the center, which is such a far away star. There's no color visible to our naked eye. So we need to be able to bring that over. Now this one is very similar. We want all of these to be in balance. And it mostly is, right? But there's no dynamic range. There's no contrast. We're not seeing the blues. We're not seeing the darks being darks. The highlights are kind of muddy. So of course, that is our eyes. That's our retina saying, this doesn't look like color to me, but we can convert that. So we're going to add a Lumetri color here. We're going to do a basic correction and find ourselves a LUT. Now, these are, again, technical LUTs from the cameras themselves. They're not LUTs from fellow creators. They create LUTs all the time. Like I said, people opt out of the technical LUT and they create LUTs. So you can always kind of revisit some of these and see, okay, what am I looking for? Do I still want a flat image? I think I do, because I want to show you how these look, right? So let's see, go here into the third one. Look at how that starts to vary a lot more. I like this one. Okay, so let's pull all of these inwards. And I love using curves, but you can also use color wheels. So let's use color wheels here. No, I don't want to use color wheels. To be fair, I think curves is just the most accurate way to do that. Yeah, that's what I'm going with today. Okay, let's see. Let me just do. Okay, so we've got this. I lost y'all here on the chat. There you are. All right, so we've got this here, and I think I want to bring out some of the reds, some of the blues for sure, right? And you can see some of the blues are here. They're in a good place. They're nowhere up on 100 or 90, and they're nowhere below 10. So that's a good place. You can see the subject color palette right here. So like, for example, if I play it, you can see the movement. That is the color information of your scene. It's super cool to watch. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, look at that. Okay, so what we're gonna do is bring in some of those reds, and I'm gonna do that. Let's see if this works. I'm gonna bring these reds up. Just a tad bit. And at first it looks maddening. Like I said, you need them to blend together. You need RGB to be on the same exact line. So when I'm looking at this, I'm trying to get them to align exactly perfect. Do you see how the red is gone? Right? That little magenta crossover between blue and red. Same with this. Bring it down. And at the moment, I'm trusting this is going to do something for me because I'm not even looking at the footage just yet, right? I'll do that later once I want to kind of do the last touches. And the same with green. I feel like, all right, there you go. So that neutralized all of the strange colors that were happening there. Now we can bring in our highlights, midtones, and shadows. So we can bring the highlights up. We can bring the shadows down. So people are always saying, hey, S-curve, why an S-curve? They just tell you to do an S-curve, but not for what reason. So the highlights live at the top. Let's look at this. The highlights live at the top. This is white, pure white, no information. Highlights, midtones, shadows, black, no information. So when you're doing an S-curve, you're essentially bringing up the highlights. You're keeping the midtones in the center, and you're bringing down the shadows. You're doing a contrast based on light, right? So if I did an opposite S-curve, I'm bringing up the shadows, I'm lowering the highlights. But that is really hard to do on footage because in footage, the rule of thumb is that you want to overexpose, like just a tad bit, like 1 or 2 stops. So much like in film, right? In film, the film is a little bit delicate, right? It's chemistry. So it needs to be exposed a little bit more because it needs light to be able to do all its thing. In photography is the opposite. We want it to be a little bit darker. So in digital photography. So in footage, in film, in video footage, you want a little bit more exposure because pulling up those shadows, it's a lot harder than pulling down the highlights. Okay, so that's a rule of thumb there. Make sure that when you're exposing in camera, you have the best scenario. Now, I had an overcast scene, so that was really tricky for me to play around with. But because I know that rule, I know not to try to force my shadows up because I've got what I've got, you know? This isn't the place to necessarily push shadows to the top. That's where you land in frustrations. But I can pull down some midtones to create a little bit more contrast here, right? So now I've created some more contrast. And you can see here, everything's aligned, right? And then we go here to Command 5. We go to our effect controls. You can see in my Lumetri before. Let's cut this one up so we can see it too. Got I and O. In point and out point. Okay, so let's take it away from this one and keep it on this one. And do a quick play. And we said we can slow this down to 50, right? So Command R or right click speed duration, and we can do 50. And do quick play right there. That's beautiful. So much better than where we started, right? And even if it's an overcast, even if it's a moment that, actually, I'm gonna do a quick Command D here so you can see this in a nicer way. Even if it's an overcast, you have the potential to add some dynamic range there because you recorded this in a way that is flat, that contains all that information. Nate says, that's very cool. I'm so glad that you're learning from this because this all seems very intimidating at first. I know that. I know that it's very hard to gather the right footage, the right moments, the right scenes, and the right settings ultimately. But it is worth it once you really understand why are these things there? What are they for? So one last step here that we're going to do is, so we did this shot. Let me see, what was the one shot we did? This shot right here. So we did this beautiful color right here, right? So that's really pretty. So now one of the things you can do is, instead of doing everything all over, if you have a similar scene, we can copy, and let's say I add a familiar footage right here. Maybe add a couple, maybe this one. Okay, so let's say I add this footage right here. It's me slacklining, also in Hawaii, which was amazing. I was like, did I just get the slackline in Hawaii? Like, hold on. And I can just hit paste in the effect controls, and it adds that Lumetri directly in here, right? And this Lumetri, I think, only had the conversion LUT in here, but that's so cool. You can just save it. Now, if you like an effect, for example, I love this effect right here. This one we did. Let's do Shift D here. One final thing I love doing, and mind you, all of these we did it at the clip level, but you're welcome to add an adjustment layer so it applies to all of your clips at once. What I want to do here as a final step is I want to be able to save this beautiful color palette for any remaining footage from that day that I can also apply all of these steps. This one had like 3, right? We had the conversion LUT, we had well, actually we ended up disregarding the conversion LUT on this one, but we did a lot of the color wheels, the curves. So we want to be able to not have to redo all those steps at every single clip. So what we can do is right click this Lumetri Color right here and save a preset. And I can say color Hawaii. And I would say warm tones and just save it. And when you go to effects, you can go here under presets and you're going to find all of these different effects that I've saved in the past. I've saved green tint, contrast, enhanced hues, bright whites, solemn color palette, vintage Lumetri Color preset. And I've got here color Hawaii, right? Oh, thank you, Nate. I appreciate that. Nate says, you speak at a comfortable speed that is easy to follow and understand. I am so glad. I think that is such a big deal to hear. It's always so hard to kind of know at which speed we are all in nowadays, right? Okay, so we've got our Lumetri here. And so that's super awesome because at any point I can go into, let's see, I'm going to remove these Lumetris from this one completely. And I can go into my effects and drop in a green tint. Maybe that works for it, right? It works like filters. It might not be compatible with your footage, but it might be compatible with another footage, right? A little bit of contrast. I have some variations here that I can play with. I can double click and add those colors. And these are presets that you can customize, that you can make. Gosh, you could even sell them if you want to. So yes, you can export LUTs, but you can also create presets. Those are different from LUTs. Remember, LUTs is more of a technical step, and these are more of a color grading step. So that's where this is being saved. Of course, you can always save maybe like an S-log step. You can save almost about anything here. But as a last step, I think what I'm going to do here is instead of applying it directly onto my clip, I'm going to show you how to add an adjustment layer. So in our projects bin, we're going to do new item, adjustment layer, click OK. And you can label that color if you want. We're going to drop it in, drag it over just like that. And that now is not at a clip level. Now we're working with, let's switch this over to effect controls. There you go. Now we're working with the adjustment layer. So the adjustment layer can take on any of the same properties that you can put on a clip. So that can be applied to several clips at once. So in this case, I've got this Lumetri Color effect that I'm going to copy from this fella. And I'm going to add it onto my Lumetri effect. I'm going to add it to the adjustment layer. So now when I have the adjustment layer, I can reduce the intensity of that effect by increasing or decreasing its visibility right here. So if you see it here in action, you would see something like this, something like that, going up. Right? So that's the benefits of using an adjustment layer. You have all of those options. So a nice run through here. This one kind of got more saturated. nice run through here of what are the possibilities of color editing in Adobe Premiere, playing with all of your footage and exploring a little bit more of the Lumetri Scopes. Thanks everyone for joining me. Again, my name is Cyn Lagos. I hope to see you on the next one, and stay tuned for so many more streams today. Thank you. Bye.